Good morning, afternoon, evening, and welcome to Concerned Citizens Presents. Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods is an organization dedicated to peace, economic and social justice, good government, and a clean environment. One way of achieving that mission is listening to experts discuss pressing local, national, and international issues. Before COVID struck, concerned citizens met regularly to hear these experts. After COVID arrived, concerned citizens turned to Zoom, video recording talks, panels, and debates for later broadcast on this channel. Now that COVID is in remission, our main menu is again in-person meetings. But for those of you unable to join us, Village TV is video recording our in-person speakers for later broadcast on this program. In addition, when the right opportunity comes along, Concerned Citizens Presents will continue to offer the occasional remote speaker. We hope you enjoy today's program.
Welcome to Concerned Citizens Presents. My name is Suzanne Modell, and I am a member of the committee responsible for these broadcasts. Today, we are pleased to present a conversation with Judge Edgar Walker, a retired justice of the Supreme Court of Kings County, better known as Brooklyn. In recent years, court decisions have played a growing role in determining government policy. Today, there are more than 200 Trump-appointed judges on the bench, including 54 appeals court justices and 3 Supreme Court justices. Thus, Concerned Citizens is pleased to have an opportunity to take a closer look at the structure of our judiciary. Born and raised in New York, Judge Walker holds a bachelor's from Cornell and a JD from Columbia. After graduation, he worked for nonprofits and private law firms until 1991, when he was elected a judge of the Bronx County Civil Court. Later, he was elected to the Bronx County Supreme Court and more recently to the Kings County Supreme Court, from which he retired last year. In short, Judge Walker's 30 years deciding cases for the New York State courts makes him well qualified to answer our members' questions. Welcome, Judge Walker.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. And I look forward to hopefully being able to answer the questions.
Today's program will proceed as a conversation between Judge Walker and a few members of Concerned Citizens. I'd like to introduce them briefly. Jonathan Adler.
Hello.
Warren Walker. Warren, could we hear from you?
Oh, yes. Here I am. Hello.
Jules Zalon.
Nice to meet you, Judge Walker.
Nice to meet you too.
Barbara Siri.
Hi, everybody.
And Alan Feldman.
Hi, and thank you, Judge Walker, for being here today.
In terms of format, I will moderate, asking a member to pose a question. Judge Walker will reply, after which any participant can ask a follow-up question. However, we need to cover 4 or 5 distinct topics, and we only have an hour, so I will make sure we don't devote too much time to a single issue. So, Jonathan, would you please begin?
Thank you, Sue. Judge Walker, I'm interested in the issue of the choice between 2 methods, the main 2 methods by which judges get to the bench, particularly in trial courts, lower courts. One is election by the voters. The other is appointment, usually by the governor, confirmation, often by the state senate, and sometimes with recommendations from a commission of expert lawyers and others. I wonder if you have any thoughts about the pros and cons of those two methods, considering that judicial elections have gotten incredibly expensive. So special interests are at times, quote, buying judges, and that voters are inclined to vote for former prosecutors under the theory that being tough on crime is what's important, even though the business of trial courts, approximately 3/4 of it is civil. That's my question.
Okay. Just to start, off the top of your heads, of those who are here, who favors appointed? How many favor appointed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, no, 3.
4.
And then, oh, yeah, but your picture didn't raise his hand.
Yes.
And so it's 4-2 in favor of appointed. You understand that the entire federal judiciary is appointed. All of the judges on the Supreme Court and every single Court of Appeals judge, district court judge, they're all appointed by the president. And if you think that's turned out so great, I don't know.
I think that's a problem.
Yeah. I may be biased in that I'm elected. And in New York, it's mixed. So you can kind of see, to a certain extent, the result of the appointed process and the result of the elective process. The Court of Appeals, which is New York's highest court, not the Supreme Court, which I'm on, or was on. Court of Appeals is appointed by the governor with the confirmation by the Senate. I don't know, for those who read the New York Times, perhaps there's been a lot of complaints about the quality of the appointments that Governor Cuomo made, Governor Pataki made. I guess the Democrats were particularly disappointed since the Republican governor, the Democratic Governor Cuomo appointed so many conservative judges. In New York City, the civil court, which I was initially elected to, is elected, but the family court and criminal court are appointed by the mayor. Now, there's a lot of controversy recently about Mayor Adams failing to reappoint certain judges who he didn't like the way they ruled. And you may remember back to when Mayor Giuliani was mayor, who did the same thing, that basically if the mayor didn't like what you were doing, the mayor didn't like some judges, who he thought were too lenient. Just as you were saying, the electorate might go for law and order types. New York may be unique in that there are, at least certainly in New York City, the Republicans can't elect anybody. Okay? So the process of nominating the Democratic nominee basically determines who's going to be elected. And the party is more concerned with, are you a good party person? How have you helped the party? Have you worked for the party? They don't care what your ideology is. They don't care if you're liberal, conservative. They care, one, it's a feather in your cap to have gotten your person on the court. It shows that you have some juice, maybe get some, yes, Jules.
I'm just wondering, New York, of course, does elect, but since the election is only based on essentially the candidate that the party, that the bosses essentially control, isn't that really just another way of saying it's an appointment, particularly in New York?
Well, except it's an appointment not by an elected official. It's an appointment by the party poobahs, district leaders, and the like. And to a certain extent, I can tell you from personal experience, I sat in the criminal court for a while. And I was not the DA's favorite judge. I can put it that way. And sometimes an assistant DA will say, well, you know, we're keeping, you know, and the DAs do keep records on judges. And we're going to tell on you to the mayor. And thinking, because as I explained, criminal court judges are appointed by the mayor. But since I was an elected civil court judge sitting in criminal court, the mayor couldn't touch me. And the assistant district's attorneys didn't realize that. Tell the mayor anything you want, he has no control over me. So to that extent, being an elected judge shielded me from the pressure that the appointing authority could have put on me. An interesting story.
Jonathan has a question, has a follow-up, and then I think we
Sure.
should.
Oh, right. You have that little hand thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Judge Walker. First, a quick reaction or question, really, a rhetorical question to your points about the quality of the bench. You know, the entire federal bench, the quality of some judges in New York. My question would be what I call the Youngman interrogatory, which I named after Henny Youngman, who in his vaudeville shtick was asked, "How's your wife?" And he says, "Compared to who? Compared to who?" I think compared to who is the most important question in all politics or life. But be that as it may, my experience is as a person who, for one of the major parties here, is on the committee that makes endorsements of judges and interviews or candidates and interviews them, and then gets emails and telephone calls from voters asking if I can tell them anything about who to vote for, and asking other people. Nobody knows anything about the caliber of the judges that they're voting for in an election.
That's right.
And it seems
absolutely right.
I know.
Seems to turn on how many signs they have stuck in the grass in various places. So I don't think that's a very smart process for selecting judges. And, you know, I appreciate your reaction to that.
Yeah, it's strict party line. in just about, I can't imagine anybody not voting strict party line on judges for that very reason, that they don't know anything about these down ballot people, and they'll just say, I'm a Democrat, I'll vote for the Democrat.
But usually they're running in nonpartisan elections. The party is not indicated, certainly in California. And
everybody knows anyway. They're called nonpartisan, but everybody knows what party. That's what I've been told, that they're not really nonpartisan.
But Judge, are you assuming that the American public, especially in California, where we just had a big election, there were a number of judges on that ballot, the information about each judge was so vague and so general, there was no way to make any kind of informed decision. So of course, I mean, so what value really is an elected versus appointed? I think I trust the party bosses more than, you know, since I don't have the time to read the whole judicial history of each judge, and I'm not sure I'd be qualified to make a decision based on that. I really do need, you know, the advice of my party, you know, members for that.
Yeah, an interesting story. When I ran for Supreme Court, I ran in Bronx County, and that means no way I'm going to lose. Bronx County is probably the most Democratic county. I think it is the most Democratic county in the state. That year, Rick Lazio, who had previously run against Hillary Clinton for Senate and lost, ran for governor in the primary. He won the Conservative Party primary, but lost the Republican Party primary. And the party, the Republicans and the Conservatives, didn't want to split their vote. But the only way to get someone who won the primary off the ballot is to kill him.
Well, that's the Bronx, so that might have happened.
Yeah. To have him move out of state, or to nominate him for a judicial office. So Rick Lazio, who comes from Wall Street, made millions a year on Wall Street, the last thing he wanted to be is a judge. So in order to get him off the governor's line, they had to nominate him for judge, but they nominated him for judge in Bronx County, guaranteeing that he would lose. So I wound up having a very high-profile opponent running against me for Supreme Court, and I got 90-some-odd% of the vote. But that's
I think maybe we should move on. That's certainly interesting. I don't know that we were wholly persuaded that maybe it's kind of a tie here. You know, it's there are pros and cons of both methods. You just have to choose which. Absolutely,
there are some brilliant appointed judges and brilliant elected judges. There's no doubt about that. I didn't mean to say that, you know, all appointed judges are terrible or all elected are great.
Yeah, but I do think the point is an interesting one, is that actually in the case of New York, the elections pre-decided. So it's a little bit different from possibly elections elsewhere. Okay, I'd like to move on to a question that I had posed, because I get to moderate and I get to be in the audience too. And that has to do with judicial discretion. In some parts of the country, there have been, and then there have been some changes, but there have been some legislative constraints on what judges could do. Perhaps the most infamous being the one here in California with the 3 strikes, you're out, where there have been cases of people who have been put away for life for, I don't know, stealing a toothbrush or something of that nature. But I'm not sure that necessarily means that these constraints are all bad. Again, I'm imagining it's nuanced, and I wonder if Judge Walker would share his views on this with us.
Yeah. Well, more recently, there also in the area of bail, there have been statutes to limit the discretion of judges in that area too. And, as a judge, I want as much of a chance to do the right thing as possible. And I've always done that. You can't say there's only one result that is appropriate. There's a wide range of results that are appropriate. And based on your judicial philosophy, you're going to choose along that spectrum. When during his nomination process, when now Justice Roberts says all judges do is call balls and strikes, that's preposterous. I'm told even that umpires have different strike zones. I'm not a follower of baseball that closely, but I'm told that it varies umpire to umpire. But the law recognizes the concept of judicial discretion, and clearly your political beliefs, your philosophy, judicial is going to enter into inevitably. And the question then becomes, under the law, there's tons of law about whether or not a judge's decision was an abuse of discretion. That's a common term. There are thousands and thousands of cases. Was it an abuse of discretion? Wasn't it abuse of discretion? And it could be that either way the judge went on a particular issue, given the facts in front of the judge at the time. Whichever way he went would be okay and not an abuse of his discretion. If he said yes, and there would be some rational basis for his going yes. If he went no, or she went no, there would be a rational basis for going no, and an appellate court saying it's up to the judge. It's within the judge's discretion, and neither way would be an abuse of that discretion. You may have heard the term arbitrary and capricious. That's a standard of when a judge or an appellate judge makes a ruling. If it's arbitrary, capricious, where there's no rational basis for a decision, then it'll be overturned. Judges review actions taken by administrative agencies. And again, the administrative agencies have discretion, and a judge will only reverse an administrative agency, whether it's the EPA or whatever, if the ruling that the administrative agency made was arbitrary and capricious, meaning just not based on the facts in front of the tribunal, just made up whatever.
So your hands were never tied. Then, for instance, a multiple offender comes before you. You were not ever required then to dispense a particular sentence on that individual. Were your hands ever tied by this? By a 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing?
Well, obviously, the sentencing laws, there are minimums and maximums that you have to sentence in between whatever the minimum sentence is for a particular offense or what are the maximum sentence. But within that range, you're pretty much free. New York State did have does have predicate felons statutes in which if you've previously been convicted of a felony, the range of sentencing is increased. The minimum goes up. Generally, the maximum does not go up, but the minimum goes up based upon whether or not you're deemed to be what's called a predicate felon. Yes.
Could you comment on bail then a little bit? Because the bail law has changed in your state.
Bail, there's been a lot of movement away from cash bail, where a judge cannot set bail and has to release someone on his own or her own recognizance in generally nonviolent misdemeanor cases is where it applies. Now, absent these kinds of statutes, there are basically only 2 realistic options. Do you keep them in jail?
Yeah, right.
Or do you release them? Because even under a bail system, you set bail and the perp makes bail, people are just as upset as if you had released them. You set bail at $10,000 and they make $10,000. Set bail too low because he got out. I mean, basically, people are saying, we don't want them to get out, except, maybe if they're a corporate executive or a movie producer or something like that, then we don't mind if they get out on bail. But the fact of the matter is, I could set $50 bail on someone where you and I could have somebody go to an ATM and get it in 5 minutes. But this, defendant will stay in jail for months because he doesn't even have $50.
Yeah, that's what we're all concerned about, that injustice before they've even been, sentenced. I mean, before they've even committed they've been found guilty, convicted. Thank you.
Yeah. And yes, Alan.
To ask you a question. Well, first about bail. I mean, the question isn't about bail, but I think a lot of people don't understand the what bail is, and bail is my understanding is bail is to ensure the defendant's appearance in court. It's not supposed to be necessarily how vicious or nasty his crime was or her crime was.
Depends.
I don't think people understand that. But I want to ask you about sentencing. And I'm always curious, as to how much input things like the probation department, I think it's the probation department in New York, does a sentencing report, pre-sentencing report, and also the victim impact statements and the defendants who speak always full of remorse, etc. How much of an impact does that have on actual sentencing? It just would seem to me that the victim impact statements, unless they are previously submitted in just in written form, and what the defendant has to say, they're saying it in court right before the judge sentences them. Well, their sentence has probably already been determined. But I'm curious, I don't know that. So,
yeah, I mean, I would generally have an idea of what I'm going to sentence someone to before the day of sentence. I do read the probation reports, or I did read the probation reports. I found them helpful. In New York, as everywhere, the defendant is allowed to make a statement. If you have a good lawyer, they tell you what to say. And I'm not so sure how effective that is. And the same with victim impact statements, for me at least, is that, they'll tell you how it affected their lives. And some actually come in and say, we forgive them, and we don't want you to do whatever. And some say, I want the death penalty for him, even though it's not a death penalty case. But I think mostly just the defendant's background, his criminal record, her, what her prospects are going forward, whether probation is an appropriate sentence. Does the defendant seem amenable to, probation, and assuming that probation does its job in terms of helping someone to find a job and getting into a drug program, whatever the person needs. Sometimes a split sentence. In New York, you could have a split sentence where you could serve some time in jail or prison and the balance of your sentence. For misdemeanors, the split sentence could be as much as 2 months split with 3 years probation, or for felonies, 6 months split with 5 years probation or more.
Jonathan has his hand up.
Oh, yeah,
that little yellow hand.
That yellow hand. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Jonathan.
You're muted. Oh, there he goes.
A quick follow-up about bail. We had on our ballot, last election before this one, as an initiative, implementing a no cash bail system, an alternative. There was a commission. Governor Jerry Brown and the California Supreme Court Chief Justice went out front arguing that cash bail was a terrible means of injustice, where people are kept in jail, often forced to plead guilty to a lesser offense. And the bail industry, the bail bond industry, put up tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars to beat it back. And it is easily demagogued. The substitute was for judges to consider public safety as well as likelihood to appear, ties to the community. But it's so easily demagogued, and that indicates that there are things in the criminal justice system, the whole justice system, where there are special interest industries, such as the private prison system industry, And it's very hard politically to get those things done. So that's just a comment for you to react to. Thanks.
Yeah, well, Alan betrayed his New York roots when he said that bail is designed to ensure the defendant's appearance in court. That's been the law in New York State and still is. But as Jonathan said, there are other considerations that other jurisdictions allow, which is danger to the community. The federal system allows consideration of danger to the community when setting bail. California is now apparently considering the same thing. Most other states allow some form of consideration of public safety in setting bail. New York is in the minority. I mean, I haven't done the survey, but it's my impression that New York is in a minority in terms of limiting the purpose of bail solely to appearance in court. And it's a good question. I mean, does cash bail really ensure defendant's appearance in court? I don't know that it makes any difference at all for the most part. Usually it's not the defendant who puts up the bail in any event. Usually it's a relative or a bail bondsman. And maybe it makes a difference when a bail bondsman puts up, because then you have Dog the bounty hunter who's going to track you down if you don't show up. But normally if private people put up bail, I'm not sure that makes, is somebody not going to show up if they're going to lose $1,000 or whatever, as opposed to going to jail? I don't know.
Well, it's interesting that you don't. I mean, I would just say that sounds like an empirically answerable question if people collected the data. But maybe we need to move on. We've got two more topics that we need to cover. So Warren, I'm going to let you go next. You have an opportunity to speak to Edgar Walker. Would you like to go ahead?
First, let me say that I'm absolutely delighted to be together with my brother again, if only virtually, because it's been a long time. But I have a short question and probably short answer. I'd like to know whether you think that judges should have term limits or that they should be given lifetime appointments.
Oh, lifetime appointments. I'd still be on the bench if I had a lifetime appointment.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, it would be fantastic. But clearly, a lifetime appointment, the theory is that it insulates the judge from public opinion, or if not public opinion, from the mayor's opinion or the governor's opinion or the president's opinion as to whether or not they like a particular ruling that you made. So in theory, judicial independence is furthered by a lifetime tenure. There was a debate when the New York Constitution was first adopted as to whether Supreme Court judges should be, namely my level, should be appointed or elected for life or for a term of years. And what
or by age, right?
What's that? They decided on a 14-year term of office. And the understanding was, given the age at which somebody might become a judge and the mortality rate back in the early 1800s, that would essentially be a lifetime appointment. Yes, Barbara.
Obviously, if you have an appointment for a certain number of years, that solves the problem of insularity. You know, that should be taken off the table at that point. You've got
to, how many years?
Okay, well, 15 years, 10 years, 15 years. I mean, and this really has come up because the majority of the American public right now is so distressed with the Supreme Court of the United States. So, and I hadn't really considered that before, because of course it depends on the judge. You know, it depends on that office holder. So I think the sea change is quite prevalent in the United States now, that because of some there's too much insularity, I think, from opinion and a general feeling in the population, that now term limits are going to be discussed more vigorously. And I just feel like they did it to themselves, you know.
Yeah.
And there's nothing we can do about it without changing the Constitution.
I know, and that's almost impossible to do, but
yeah. And like I said, I mean, it depends on who the judge. I mean, they recall. I mean, some states have recall elections for judges. And if you remember a while back in Iowa, there was a recall of the judges who had ruled a pro-abortion ruling, and this was the Iowa Supreme Court. They recalled the judges who made that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suzanne.
I don't know if we want to go there, but maybe, what comes to mind kind of to ask you in this context, as our society, I mean, recalling is at least a legal process. But lately our society seems to have really been uncomfortable about leaders making decisions they don't like, and sometimes with threats. I believe there was a lawyer who made a decision, a judge who made a decision in an abortion case who was threatened. So that if I might ask, have you ever felt uncomfortable as a judge, or do you feel that over time becoming a judge is a somewhat more dangerous proposition? Could you comment?
You mean physically dangerous?
Yeah.
Well, yes,
yeah.
to yourself
Yeah.
or your family.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
When I sat on the criminal side, I took certain precautions, but for instance, for a while I didn't register because your home address is a matter of public record.
You mean to vote? Register to vote?
Register to vote. Because your home address is on your voter registration, which is a public record. So
also, you're not on Facebook, and you don't do.
I'm not on none of that. None of that. But no, I more in terms of rulings, as opposed to just general, you're a criminal court judge, so watch your step, is the political influence that we had previously discussed. I was the election law judge in Brooklyn when I sat in Brooklyn. And the first case that I had was the case where Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, tried to throw his primary challenger, Zephyr Teachout. I don't know if any of you
I remember that name.
We
yeah.
all know her.
Yeah.
So I handled the litigation of Andrew Cuomo against Teachout. And I ruled against Cuomo. I mean, this was a case that was, from what I understand from Warren, was carried in the press worldwide. He said, you know, his local paper had a story about the case in the Netherlands. And the editorial, you know, the Times editorial praised me, and they had daily coverage of the trial. She got, had he not sued her, she might have gotten 10% of the vote. As it turned out, she got over 30% of the vote because of all the bad publicity that Cuomo got for trying to knock her off the ballot. And, you know, it's in your mind that this is the governor of the state who you're ruling against. And by the way, he made it known afterwards that he didn't particularly care for my decision. He had that transmitted to me. But I did not feel, again, because he didn't appoint me, nor did the mayor or any of other people who the governor could influence. They didn't appoint me. So I had no problem in
doing the right thing. Yes.
Yeah, and it went up on appeal, and the appellate division unanimously affirmed my decision.
That's great. That's great. I think you're slowly working your way across here, persuading us that elected judges is a bit of an advantage. I know, Jonathan, you have a question, but if you could hold it, I'm just a little concerned about time. So let's let Jules go now, and then if there's time later, we can come back to you, Jonathan. Jules, please, you have an
Yes, Judge, while freedom of speech is a hallowed right in America, it's not without limits. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Defamation and copyright infringement can be very expensive. So what about legislation that creates a public tort, a civil action for publicly making false statements that, if true, would represent a clear and present danger to public order, and recognizing standing, the right to sue, to individuals as vicarious avengers of the public interest to seek damages against willful violators. The term vicarious avengers has actually been recognized, albeit rarely, in trademark infringement cases when the miscreant makes a claim that is harmful to the public. Wonder what you think about something like that, assuming a court would allow it.
You mean like the law that Texas passed, giving a private right of action to individual citizens to sue somebody who had an abortion?
Well, that's someone that's a vigilante enforcing an actual statute. What I'm talking about is basically, we have heard this now, that at least 40% of the country believes that the country, that the election of Biden was phony, was fraudulent. Right now, there are people who have glommed on to Trump's claim, that we should do away with the Constitution because for absolutely no reason at all. The point is that these are dangerous statements that have the ability and the real potential of destroying the very democracy that allows them to make their ridiculous comments. I wonder what you think about that.
I think that's a dangerous idea. I mean, who's to decide? You know, the question that was sent to me was making a knowingly false statement. That means lying.
That's right.
So you're going to let anybody, whether or not that person was the subject of whatever was being said, anybody can sue anybody else for lying?
No, anyone can sue the perpetrator of the lie if the lie is the equivalent of yelling fire in a crowded theater. I believe, and I'm not being interviewed here, I believe that truth is much more valuable and much more important than the right to speak. Because,
and who decides what the truth is?
Well, that's why I'm only talking about a civil action. That's why, for example, Alex Jones has just been found.
That's a good
liable.
example. Yeah.
Alex
that's the example.
Who decides?
Right.
What is it? You have a jury?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, just like
jury.
Alex Jones.
That's right. And if you want to go out and perpetrate a fantastic lie that has real danger, with the test being a judicial test, because courts will have to determine whether that jury finding satisfies this very strict law. But the point is, you make a lie, you produce a lie that produces damage. It's just civil liability. We're not stopping anyone from talking. We're simply saying there's a price for the type of damage you do to the public well.
Well, what about the lawsuits against the January 6th, attackers of the White House? Although you carrying that farther, that we should be able to sue Trump and put Trump on trial for perpetrating that lie, which was.
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, the theory with Trump is that he did, in fact, incite a riot. I mean, and that's a crime.
I mean, he's yelled fire in a crowded theater.
Yeah, no, that can be criminally prosecuted. Just like the Oath Keeper, who
just
didn't go near the Capitol, didn't participate in any way in the breaching of the Capitol. He was found guilty of a serious crime. And
of course,
I'm all for that.
Point out there's a precedent for it in the the False Claims Act that allows citizens to sue on behalf of, or as private attorney generals on behalf of the government, and then allows the government to come in and run that civil suit with the initial whistleblower getting a cut.
Yes, but that you're talking about actual calculatable money damages. A Medicare fraud. This doctor or this hospital got so many millions of dollars that it wasn't entitled to get. It's actual damages, which are actually provable to the penny.
But we don't need that. We don't need provable damages. That's
the problem I have.
No, in defamation
you can sue
cases,
when you haven't suffered any damages.
Well, I would think that the public has suffered substantially, and in defamation cases, it's the jury that decides how much that is worth. I don't know.
There are all kinds of other examples.
It depends. in some cases, well, I mean, you're the expert, I guess, but you have to show pecuniary damages in certain defamation cases. Other defamation cases you don't.
Not defamation per se.
That's what I'm talking about. Defamation per se.
And there are all kinds of other situations.
But that's, Jules, where you have, in fact, suffered an injury to your reputation, an injury to your business. You've suffered an actual injury. You're talking about suing where you haven't, except for the fact that you disagree with what the person is saying, and you find that it's dangerous in some way for him to be, or her to be saying that. You've suffered no injury. Some people find it highly entertaining to listen to, for a while, the cable news networks covered Trump nonstop as entertainment, because people enjoyed hearing the ludicrous things that he was saying. And it could have been, without that entertainment value, he wouldn't have been president.
Well,
it's wonderful, because what's going on now is I know the feeling of being in front of a judge that doesn't necessarily adopt my argument. So I'm aware of that, Judge.
Surely it's not the first time.
That's right.
now, fellas, well, luckily we're all retired here, and I'm afraid we're running low on time here. We're about out of time. I guess I will just throw in one thought here. It isn't perhaps quite.
How about giving Jonathan a chance?
We're really out of time.
Okay.
We can perhaps pursue it at another juncture. But I do think that another place to look is other countries. Of course, each country has its own legal system, but it is my understanding that in some other developed countries, it is actionable if somebody falsely yells fire in a crowded theater. So that might be maybe Jules should retire elsewhere.
It's criminal here.
Yeah.
And if you get injured in the stampede, you can sue civilly.
Right. All right. Well, I'm afraid we do have to end our program. So we've had a lively discussion, and Concerned Citizens thanks our participants and our audience for joining us. Concerned Citizens Presents began in the spring of 2020 as a way of reaching Laguna Woods residents during the COVID lockdown. Now, however, conditions have improved. Concerned Citizens is offering 2 in-person programs a month. Consequently, we have decided to discontinue hosting remote speakers on Village TV and YouTube. Instead, we will use these platforms to rebroadcast the live speakers featured at our in-person events. So to conclude, thank you for your loyalty to Concerned Citizens Presents. We hope you have enjoyed our programming. Going forward, if you can't join us in person, we hope you'll tune to this channel for rebroadcasts of our speakers. Goodbye for now.